Me, I've been in, I started kind of business development while at UCT. And yeah, I found myself in public sector and I eventually kind of found my passion. So it's true, I really do want to do contractor development to a large degree. And where I find myself now is a very unique kind of vantage point because we're sitting with a space of about 30 engineers. I've got about 17 of them reporting to me, all professional other QSs or engineers. Bulk of them are engineers of different flavors, geotechnical, electrical, ICT. My ICT engineers actually done costed the city 2 billion about 15 years ago, but we've got a 10 terabit network end to end in Cape Town, and not many people know that. So theoretically speaking, we can actually give everybody in the city internet for free if allowed to at some point in time. But yeah, it's a pretty awesome space in which to work, and we often use as kind of this model municipality. But it's because of teams like us and kind of dedicated staff. Leon and his team is part of my clients. So we are actually the big brother overseeing and supporting projects from about 10,000 rand. Got one on my desk for design review of a disabled ramp, and all the way up to 5.5 billion rand projects for the new water scheme, upgrades where we are turning literal crap water into probably the best drinkable water in the world. It's the first in the world. So there's some really interesting projects, and it's an awesome space to be in Cape Town, at least for the next 10 to 15 years. I can tell you that without a doubt. So the idea for me is just to kind of take you through some tips and tricks, what we're seeing from our side and how contractors and subcontractors sometimes fail at the most basic things. And as people that kind of put tenders together from the design phase and ideation all the way through to benefits tracking and closeout, it's disheartening to see when like sometimes basic errors are made, and even the big boys make these same errors. And the idea for me is to try and give you guys some tips and tricks. I won't go through every single one, but you guys can gladly have access to the content, take it, use it, and make the best of it. And my contact details are at the back as well. So just for context, this is the infrastructure report of the country, right? And superimposed on the city. In our space, our OPEX budget is in the region of about 60 billion rand. Our CAPEX budget over time, this year our target is 12 billion rand. And the point of this, of me mentioning and throwing numbers at you, is that often people think that this pie is small. This pie is massive, and there is enough for every single one of us to be eating from the pie, to be honest with you. It just so happens to be that the guys that have cracked the secret code of tendering and winning and being successful are the guys that always end up winning. But the reality is that the pie is actually big enough for us all to eat in our own respective ways. Whether you're responding to directly to tenders in the public space, or even creating those relationships with main contractors, and forming lasting relationships in that space. So the pie is definitely big enough. Like I said, you can go to the next slide. That's our plan. 12 billion this year. I think the last estimation on my side, we're getting closer to our end of the financial year. We've already spent in excess of about 8 billion rand, and we're sitting in April. So and when you start winning as a municipality, more money flows your way. Because if you leave our boundaries, you can start to see kind of what happens if you throw money into kind of sometimes sieves in other provinces. But it's working here, so government will inherently throw more money at it and keep throwing money at it. That's how it works. The money flows to where it's actually going to be used for the benefit of the residents, and that's what it's about. So in all likelihood, our targets over time will probably increase. I think when the mayor came in, he was telling us that his vision is we're gonna outbuild people in Cape Town, and he wants to actually see opportunities in every sector, because that's how you get jobs going. It's kind of that's the philosophy of municipalities, but here we can actually start to see it work, where everything we do is kind of purposeful, and it's about kind of getting into a space where you don't have to stress about electricity. You don't have to stress about water. Sometimes the basics. And we've seen massive immigration. I don't think I have to tell you guys, both from a business perspective as well as residents, coming here because they can literally see the difference. It's very disheartening when I go back to Joburg, and every time I go back, it's just become worse. But yeah, we want to give the advice. It's just sometimes they also have to go to their plate and clean up. We've been at that. So it's a little bit easier for us now in Cape Town. I often make this correlation that sometimes when some people get into kind of the construction sector, above that line, that's a typical iceberg type of analogy. And you can put this analogy on everything. The analogy I used was content design. You often see the final product online, Instagram, wherever you're seeing it, the paper print, that's the final product. But the reality is, it's a lot more complicated uh, under the sea level, to be honest with you. And there's many different pitfalls, quality, tendering, using data. There's a lot that was mentioned here that actually falls below the line. So it's not a very glamorous industry, but the reality is, you people sometimes kind of simplify it, and in that simplification, sometimes they set themselves up for failure. So depending on what your goal actually is, whether it is building a business from scratch, whether it is the brand, and yeah, I was listening to Nick's story, and he was talking about the checkers and the fact that they actually pulled out. Yet it could potentially have been a lucrative deal because he really understands what his brand is and what the mission is. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions, and downstream, yes, the money will come, but it's not necessarily always about the money. Sometimes it's about the brand and the vision and creating sustainability. So 100 years, awesome. That's what we want to see. We do not want to see businesses undercut themselves, because that's what we are seeing in our side. Undercut each other and then fail. I looked at the stats for the last 5 years. Um, we have, as the city, probably enabled, just by allowing those tenders in, because of the way in which we evaluate tenders, for around maybe 20 businesses to fail. And I'm not talking about small businesses. I'm talking about huge businesses that have made a mistake in terms of their pricing strategy. So you can often get it wrong, to be 100% fair. And you gotta know your bottom line. It's even more critical from where I sit. Sometimes my bill of quantities are like 20, 30 pages long. And within that pricing strategy, you can apply certain smarts. If you don't want to, as an example, give up on your labor and your materials price, play around with your P's and G's. That's the pricing strategy game. So it might seem simplistic, but you can try and interweave and actually beat the system. I think the probably the main difference between us and private development is that we often have what we used to call preferential regulations. That's now no longer legal, but we have a version of that. So maybe in block space, if you're tending directly for them, they won't necessarily have, and I don't want to make that assumption, typical what we now call RDL goals, development goals. So it's where the BEE came in.
Specific goal.
Yes, specific goals. That's what we're calling it now, right? Because we are now mandated as the municipality to make our own rules up. Previously, obviously, the goals were set by national government. But the reality is that even within that space, if you play it smart enough, knowing what your levels and your scores is, because it's known to you in every single tender, you can pre-calculate, you can technically determine the money, what that monetary value of every single point actually is. And let that sink in for you a little bit, because there's different flavors here, slightly tan versions and slightly lighter versions. If you use the information available to you on the actual tender, you can actually determine for yourself, depending on where you are, what that monetary value is, and that you then superimpose on Colin's pricing strategy that he mentioned earlier. So people often get that wrong and they undercut themselves because they think that because I'm level 5 or level 6 or whatever level you are, that you're never going to win. You can win even with a slight disadvantage depending on the value of the contract. Never forget that part. Yeah, I often see in the old dispensation, BE level 5 guys that don't have any disabled or female representation on management, and they still win because they manage to understand that part. So think about what your pricing strategy is about, and use the information available to you to be smart about how you're filling in those bill of quantities. Because if you do it smartly, you can actually win despite your color, race, or creed, to be fair. So yeah, it's a lot harder than what it seems. We all want to be on the beach and have a liquor time and retire early, but the reality is there is some effort and some details and some real strategy and planning that actually goes below sea level. This is just typical kind of project lifecycle for in the public sector. When you get the materials, and have a look at the timelines, typical timelines in the government space. It's really, really long. Typically, the average time for our kind of CapEx major projects is around 3 to 4 years in planning alone. What you guys see is this phase over there, just the procurement and the execution phase. But we've been at this, planning, strategizing different concepts, keeping Leon accountable for the different versions of the designs that he keeps sending me, checking, making sure that all his project records are up to date. That's what we do. But understand that within this game, we typically have in planning around 500 projects, multi-billion rands worth of planned projects. The idea is to build a nice 10-year pipeline so we can start picking and choosing which ones we have, and we're really getting there. But the idea is we always have projects. So that 12 billion this year, next year it's 15 billion. There will always be projects. So in our space, if you get it right, you actually won't have pits and troughs. If you targeted about what you want to do and what your scope of work is, you will always have work consistently, depending on the contract form and the scope that you choose. So choose wisely what your scope is and know your limitations. That's the key. You can't tend on everything. You literally can't tender on everything, because when you chase, sometimes you chase this card, and you get it. You have to actually, because we're going to hold you to it contractually, you have to perform. So don't make that mistake where you are kind of belittling the process and your company. You're devaluing it because now you are wanting to kind of tender to too many things at the same time. And yes, you've got private sector and you've got public sector, but choose wisely and know your scope. So what I was trying to kind of get around, starting with this kind of project life cycle, is that there's a similar project life cycle within the contracting, and I use that analogy. So if you go to the first one, I kind of describe it as the pre-planning of a company. Whether you are a Bucky Brigade, as they call it, or whether you are a massive grade 9 multi-billion rand company, you will go through the same kind of pre-planning steps, and it's the basics of it. You need an email. You don't even need a registration for that matter. You can be a sole prop operating up to $1 million, and even that is a significant amount of money for a sole prop to earn, especially if you never had anything before. So get the basics right. Get your communications right. Get some sort of identity. It doesn't have to be this massive over branding story. It can be a very basic story. As long as you're able to communicate and you're able to describe to people what you do, you're good to go. And there's some nuts and bolts in between. Bank account, your IDs. But the point is that sometimes the barriers to entry, especially in public sector, is not as high as what you think it is. It is a lot of administration, to be fair. And if you can power through the admin, I promise you, you can win. You can put yourself in a position to win. You don't have to pay for someone to come in and do that for you. I see this mistake often as well, where often we see the same handwriting coming through on tenders. because people have given that tendering business, which is the core way of getting your work, to a third party. And when you start evaluating, I think I've been involved. I had to redo my chairperson nomination the other day. I've done about 127 tenders over time. That is from ideation, not only in built environment, also in forensics. I've helped Office of the City Manager with some ombudsman-related work systems, because engineers can kind of take ideas and formalize it and put it in spec and nicely collate it into a tender document. That's what we're really good at. Kind of taking plain language and turning it into specifications that you guys see in the tender space. So myself and my team's useful in different spaces as well. But the reality is, yeah, you can actually be quite successful if you just kind of like focusing on what you do well. So get the basics right. That's quite important. But don't take too long planning. Yeah, if you got the basics right, and you're in a position to tender, don't overthink it. You don't have to be necessarily perfect. You just need to meet the minimum criteria to get through. So do not complicate things. Often what we see is massive tenders with company profiles and all sorts of extra additional material that wasn't even asked for. But you've spent that money on that. The other day I saw this file probably costs for $500, laminated and pressed and perfectly bound. But the reality is we've asked for probably 10 pages within that set. So give what we ask for. Do not give any extra stuff because it doesn't help you. It's not useful. If we ask you to fill it in a particular way, fill it in that way. Don't try to be different or novel or new and give it to us in a different way, because there's a lot of thought that's gone into how those tenders have been structured. So just reply in the same way. But I often see so many poorly completed tenders. And sometimes when you see the name on the front cover, you're like, this is a multi-billion rand company doing work all over the world. And this is the level of sometimes garbage that we get. So be diligent about it as well. If you know your scope, you won't be tendering for 1,000 tenders at once. And then you can actually take the time to do the quality control and the quality checks as a director. We can even see it rush signatures because the director hasn't checked. And then like basic errors sometimes. So read through the requirements and give us what we want in whatever you do. All right. So get your house in order. That's important because you don't want to be scrambling when it's tender time. It can come out at any moment in time. So make sure that all of your statutory documents, all of your registration documents are in check and novel and there, so that you can move instantaneously whenever these things become available to you. Because again, it will come. It's just about when, and you got to be ready. So get your house in order. That's the important part. Kind of the second phase is around identity, and I won't go through every single one, but there's a couple of like basic requirements, right? And I'll see if I can kind of touch on the important ones. I've already spoken about knowing your scope and scale. Often, obviously within government, there's some statutory bodies that we expect people, especially contractors, to be associated with, because it's law. So as an example, CIDB, Construction Industry Development Board, that's statutory. If you want to work with a city, or any municipality or state-owned entity for that matter, you have to be associated with them. So those are the barriers to entry when you speaking to public. It's not a very difficult process. I've done it myself a couple of times, assisting people. You can have a CIDB stamp of approval if all your docs are in place within 3 to 4 days. So it does not have to take very long, but often we leave it very late and you miss certain golden opportunities and threads. All right. So, and also know your class of works. That's important too. So that's your scope. Whether you are a general builder, whether you are civils, whether you're electrical, know your scope of work and kind of stick to that. It doesn't limit you in terms of what other work you can do for contractors. That's just you going in it. If you want to go direct, you understand what your scope of works and your class of works is, and you stick with that. So that you target it. All right. Um, Financials and limits, so important. Know your limits in terms of of just knowing in terms of your P's and G's and whatever's asked in terms of the bill of quantities, know what your limits are, your battery limits, as we call it in project management speak. Because, like I said, there's too many examples of quite big companies having failed, even with sufficient cash flow. Our stats, by the way, is 98% last year and 100% to date in terms of 30-day payment. So you're not going to get delays and payment related issues with the city. So the actual problem comes with cash flow and management inside. So skill up there. Make sure that you've got risk mitigation, that there's a fund that you can tap into if you are in trouble. Because you know that systematically, at least the municipality will be paying you 30 days. So be smart, have risk mitigation in terms of finances and pools of money you can draw from. That's quite important as well, because if something does go down, you need to be able to tap in and tap in quite quickly. We do not want to see businesses fail through anything that we do, and that's quite important and critical. We never want to see you fail. We want to see you thrive, because there's a resident that's waiting for the service at the end of the day, and that's our main prerogative. So people like Leon, PMs pushing contractors, you often see they're pushing them quite hard, but it's because there's a resident, and it's all of us, we are residents as well, that we are working for. So the push is coming because he's under pressure, because it's a resident that's looking for that service downstream. That's the important part. Ours is a different model. It's not about profits. Primarily, it's about service delivery, creating an economic environment, and setting the example. So that's my day job, pushing innovation, strategic interventions, asset management, digitalization, boom. That's my day job, sustainability practices. Because that's the example municipality should be setting in everything we do. And his team does a lot of that type of work as well. But just kind of continuing down that train of thought in terms of your identity of your company is know your company's limitations, your structure, your skill set, your personnel. Keep them engaged and switched on. That's quite important. It's sad to see demoralized staff sometimes on site, because we do reviews and we check. And if you got an authoritarian type of leadership style, you can see the youngsters aren't responding very well to that. So sometimes you also need to check yourself, and kind of sharpen those softer skills as well. It's a big flaw in the construction industry. We don't hyper focusing on the softer skills, because there is where you start talking about efficiencies in your business. We just you want to go from Paki Brigade to fancy systems, but you haven't taken your staff and you haven't skilled up in the softer side of it as well. Never forget that part. And we're talking project management, communication with your staff, looking after your staff, those type of things as well. Creating a awesome collaborative environment, having people have the balls to come to you and say, hey, I've discovered this. Maybe Colin's not here now to tell me about the spread of this particular thing, but I'm seeing a problem here. Have the confidence to go to his supervisor or his team and say, hey, I think I've used a different product. Maybe he doesn't even know how to describe it, but he's able to at least have that conversation. And you take that input from the lowest level staff sometimes will save you the biggest amount of money, because they're there on ground level every single time. So don't forget that part. Don't forget the softer skills as well along the way. We can move to the next one. Next phase in this contractor development or a business starting plan is the plan itself. There's basic requirements. You got to set yourself goals, right? And sometimes there's hacks to the system as well. You don't always have to start a secret, industry secret. If you want to do business with the public sector, obviously it's CIDB-ness you have to get. And you also have to register with bargaining council. So there is some things, statutory things in our environment that you have to comply with. But the reality is that you have to have a plan. I'll give you a quick example. Over the last 3 years, we've seen businesses that were grade 1 jump all, that is a 1 million rand turnover, go all the way to grade 6 within 1 year. That's the power. We're talking what now, 50 million in terms of turnover in 2 years. And they were successful with every single one of those mini projects. They had a framework tender in the city, and we kept giving them work, and they kept delivering. That's what we want to see. We want to see people and companies naturally move up CIDB ranks. Whether you do it at a fast pace, like those examples, or whether you do it gradually as part of your actual company's growth plan. Have the plan. That's the key. Often we kind of haphazard about these things. But have a plan, state your plan, and kind of work towards those goals. That's the key. Um, um, there's some details around being project specific. Um, there is often another tips and tricks is that you guys often don't understand the contract with which you work. That's the rules of engagement. What we're seeing is in our world, we've got a couple of different contract forms that we use naturally. GCC, General Conditions of Contract, FIDIC, various flavors of it, NEC, with province, state-owned entities. JBCC is primarily, I think, what many of the master build associated companies would work with because it's about building works. But there's a very poor understanding of the contract because you just want the job. But the contract is the rules of engagement. And where it becomes really interesting is when you're in trouble and the penalty clauses and the communications and all of those. Sometimes it's a legitimate claim. And because someone hasn't understood the actual contract form, they time barred because they haven't responded in a certain time frame. The other day, we had to write off 9 million rands worth of money to a contractor because he was a day late. He only realized, oh, shit, I was supposed to put a notice in a day late, and be like, sorry, here's the rules. You agreed to it, you signed it. Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, you have to forfeit that money. So know your rules of engagement. Whatever contract form you go into, understand the rules of the game. All right, that's a simple thing. There's ChatGPT that can translate these fancy clauses into plain English. You have no excuse not to know your contract form. Um, there's some extra things in our space as well. As an example, public indemnity insurances, sometimes PI insurances. Have these service providers locked in because you don't have to pay. Those costs are eventually passed on to the city, but have them locked in so that you have the ability to pull the trigger when you do have the contract. That's the key. You don't have to have 10 million or 20 million rands all the time unless it's a requirement from Block or other property developers or government. But the reality is have the ability to get it like this. That's the key. All right. So under planning, kind of the tenets are take your time and plan diligently. Don't just run in. Have a backup plan or two, especially when it comes to money. All right. Even a lawyer or two that understands construction and can get you out of a pickle, a contractual pickle, because the city will give you lots of special conditions. It's my job. I've created God, probably all of the city's construction tenders now I've reviewed line by line and included new special conditions, not to catch you guys out, but to protect the risk or to risk mitigate from a city's perspective. So remember that that's my boss. So I need to protect myself, but it's a give and take. When I protect myself with a special condition, your job is to price for that risk. So don't undercut yourself as a result of that because you are taking on the risk. If I say, look, I don't care about security, it's your job to sort out security at site. You go, okay, I got you, Carl. That line item, you have to be diligent and skyrocket it and consider the risk wherever you're working. Don't just go and just put the value in there and then you move on. We've handed the risk to you, so we must pay for that risk, and that's the key. Okay. And then communicate if unsure. You are able to communicate effectively with contract managers, project managers. Talk because we are humans as well, and we can explain how things work. And then lastly, check. Quality is very important in this game, especially in the planning space. So give it some thought. Recheck it, come in a different angle, speak your network, grow, listen, take lessons learned like from Colin and the rest of the guys as well. That's the whole point of this, is to network and actually learn from other people's. You don't even have to make mistakes. Learn from other people as they go along, especially the more experienced guys. That's the key. Next one. This one is about the execution. I'll be quite quick here, and I think Colin and Stefan has spoken to this. But when you're on execution phase, obviously there's a couple of basic rules. So know your rights, know your contract. The contract specific, the mechanisms, the bill of quantities, the cash flow, all typical contract related stuff. Inflation. Think about your CPA. How is this going to be escalated? What the city will do is we'll tell you that the CPA But then you guys must think about that and how that impacts you downstream. So, and because it impacts your suppliers, it impacts everybody downstream. You have to have the ability to go to your supplier and say, hey, these guys are saying CPA and a particular index. The index is 5%. If they are coming as your supplier with 6, 7, 8%, it means that you've lost 3%. And you're going to be losing that next year and the year after that, because the city also holds you to those values. So be purposeful about and know the subtleties of inflation within the contract forms as well. That's just one example. There's a couple of other ideas there. Dispute management, variation order management, the approval process on the city side, because that's important as well. Right. And then good governance within your system. Have your checks and balances in play as well from your side, so that you are also prepped and ready as a company. All right. And then health and safety also. Typically, we don't want to see sites get shut down because of silly non-compliance. You're doing it anyways at site, and you're checking. You've got a professional that's actually appointed to do that. I see there's some safety guys around here as well. And it's an important job. They're there. Use them. If they're not rocking up to site, force them, because it's a risk to you. If he's not there and the safety valve's not in play, that site is shut down, and the only people that loses is the main contractor. That's the reality, and eventually the city as well. So be purposeful about all of your statutory requirements, even the ones that you need to keep valid during the contract period, end to end. Okay. um, and then the last section is basically the closeout, and this is where the data portion comes in. So document everything, whether you think you're going to use that piece of information or not. Daily diaries, all of these things, sometimes we preach them because that's what we taught at varsity. But the reality is, every single data point is a data point that you need. We used to live a very old school life where it was paper based. Now we've got systems that can do literally the entire project management for you with detail, metadata columns. You can go balls to the wall and start pulling trends in that. And there's various products like that available to you. So the quicker you move into digitalization space, away from the A0 program and quite old school way of working, the quicker you move to a digitalized space, the better for yourself, because then you've got data, whether you're going to use it now or not. I often use this analogy. I think about when I started working about 16, 17 years ago, I came up with this massive, elaborate budget for myself and my now wife, then girlfriend. And it kind of had some of my pension fund related like tally as I went. And I started with zero. And I went every month just religiously updating that budget, and obviously the normal budgety stuff, income, expenses, etc., etc. So I've got 15 years worth of that data, and we live in a world of AI now. I could take that entire data set, pump it in, and it could tell me my whole history, where I failed, where I was poor, where I was rich, and the trends, the ETFs I invested in. Everything is available to you, whether I knew one day AI would come or not. But that was the idea. Now I can use it. Same thing for you. Get into the habit of digitalizing your systems and having the data available to you, whether you're going to use it now or downstream. That's important. And take stock after every project so that you can carry those lessons learned. That's such a great piece of advice, they call it. Take stock of what's happened, where have you failed, what bill of quantity line items you may be undercut. Have that data set. But the only way you can make use of it is if you're actually diligent about capturing these things all along the way. Someone did a quick analysis the other day on a couple of cash flow statements, monthly cash flow statements, and we could tell, just a retrospective dive, we could tell probably month 2 in, because pretty poor front-end loading was applied at that particular job in terms of the contractor, and they failed. They closed down today. There's no one left in that business, and it's difficult to do those post-mortem sometimes, but we could see it. We could see it coming a long, long way. Obviously, for us, we only saw it at the end. But if that PM was actually diligent enough and understood kind of cash flow and how things work on a project, he could have actually prevented catastrophe in terms of closing down that project. So we are also quite hard on PMs and get them to skill up and mature as well. I'm using Leon as an example. He's a world-class PM, by the way. Um, it actually has the title. You won, right? Yes, you won. So that's an international IPMA award winner there for his work in the past. And then just kind of bring it home, a couple of lessons just to summarize. So number one, focus on the planning and preparation. That's that first step. Sit, plan, reiterate, grow, adjust as you move along. That's quite important. Number two, understand the rules of the game. The laws, the regulations, the tendering space. Our tenders are very consistent. There's a standardized form. Once you've done it once and you've cracked it, you can rinse repeat every single time after that. So put the effort in, pay the $300. If you fail, that's the most important part, and it's even better in public because every single piece of decision making and logs, the pricing, everything has to be made public. So you are sitting with a city that has a database of, if you in a painting game, I can go to a particular tender and I can actually see what values were tendered for the back as far as possible, as long as there was electronic systems on the, and it's available to you. You have the right to get this information. Ask why you failed, why you've won, where's the second guy, what's his pricing. It's public documents, and you can request that documents. That is a data source of absolute gold there, just there, and it's available to you just in a PDF form, but now ChatGPT can even look at that information as well. And you don't even have to go down to the nuts and bolts. You can just search for paint and find the value and extract the data, and you make it useful in your business as well. All right, that's number two. Continuously sharpen your skill set and that of your staff. Quite important. I mentioned it already, the softer side of things, often forgotten. But work on your team. It doesn't have to be because it's CPD and you continuously no, it's the right thing to do. Skill up, get the other youngsters coming in and have continuous growth. That's how 100-year companies are formed. It's not the same people. It's new blood coming through and being enabled all the time. All right, so sharpen your skill as the owner or the directors or the management team, and by extension, all the way down your organization. Four, exercise good financial controls and pricing strategy. I've given you a couple of tips, and the gents have given you as well. But it can be sophisticated if you really apply your mind, but especially in government. 90-10 principle, 80-20 principle. Get a value for your BE score and work that value into your pricing strategy. Be smart about that part as well. All right, it's not doom and gloom for white people. I promise you that much. You can win as well if you use that information wisely and the data set. You can actually determine market parity based on previous tenders. And in all likelihood, the previous tender, that tender that won will up his game. So if you play smart, you can look at the previous guy's one, figure out what your, let's call it BE price is, and add it on top of that, and all likelihood you win. Someone told me the other day they've been doing that for the last 15 years successfully. A white person, and he's got a thriving business, not in construction though. Using that principle, using the previous guy's winning bid, determining his price and his influence, and matching it accordingly. And he's won continuously year after year after year. Even the other people don't even know how he's won, but he's won because he's applied a very simple metric by applying a value to his BE-ness, if that makes sense to you guys. All right. That's just one example. Number five, find, create, and use a network of peers. I don't have to sell that to you. You're doing it right now. So extend your network. Find people that are willing to share information with you, because for people like me that has a passion for these type of things, I will give this information to you freely. That's the key, because I need you as well in order for me to meet my 12 billion rand target. That's the reality. We cannot do those things. Otherwise, we'll just have tender documents. We need the contractors, we need the subbies, and we need you all to be thriving and eating from that 120 billion rand pie over 10 years. That's the key. All right. Exercise good record keeping, governance, communicate effectively and honestly. If you are heading into trouble, communicate. You'll find, because again, the PMs, they want the job to be successful. If you communicate issues or potential issues downstream, you can make a plan, and it will even help you ideate and figure out how you're going to maneuver around this situation. whether it's mafia, whether it is no sand, no G5 compacting material because it's stuck at the harbors. Talk, and we will also help you make the plan, because it's about the residents that needs to win. So we all need to actually help solve the situation as well. It is not adversarial. It doesn't have to be an adversarial relationship. All right. 7, participate in knowledge sharing and networking. I've mentioned that already. 8, risk mitigate and always strive to deliver good quality work. That goes without saying. Number 9, use the correct channels for corrective action. Know your legal routes, when to fight, when not to fight, when to put in a variation, when to put in a dispute. Use that to your advantage as well. There's contractors in this space, I've come across them multiple times, that will purposefully, it's an extension of the pricing strategy, tip, which is number, what, 4. They'll go in low, right? Only to recover their costs through disputes. And that is a legitimate strategy that's worked for some people. You can do that if you want. You can't create the events though. That's the problem. So what they do is they'll have a look at the scope of work, have a look at where the work is taking place, understand the risk around that, and know that there's potential for maybe a mafia or a community stoppage, and they'll be very trigger happy in terms of their disputes and launching those and giving us notices. So people even do that part, which is a bit of an abuse of the system. But if you think about it, they really understand the rules of the game and they're just using it to their advantage. We also know the rules of the game and we can't fight if you're doing it according to the rules of that game. That's as simple as it is. So you can also generate an income. City doesn't like us to say these type of things, but you can also generate an income when it comes to adverse or force majeure or anything like that, if you are smart about how you implement it to pull the trigger when necessary. Okay. And then almost at the end, number 10, exercise good business and contract management principles. Fundamentally, that's important. Don't crook the books. Don't try to be silly or do commit fraud and funny things. Give us invoices for work not completed. Those type of things. Because if you get caught out, you are never coming back into the city. Um, you and your directors, that I can say for sure. We're very quick to red list. And we've got a very special, powerful clause in all of our tender documents called the reputational risk clause. It's the first in the country, by the way. We've had it for about 12 years. We pull that trigger on everything. If there is even a sniff of that you're connected to a gangster or fraud or anything, contract cancelled. So exercise good business principles, don't commit fraud, and try by all means to run your business in a fair and open and transparent manner. Yeah, because if you get caught out, the consequences are dire. Because we also have a line up to National Treasury. So if we are red listing for a particular reason, we share that information with other government entities as well. So you, in all likelihood, will be red listed in other spaces as well, which means you never get work in public sector. So don't take the chance. To be fair, there is enough. As I said, the pie is big enough for us all to eat legitimately, right? At least in Cape Town for now. Let's put it that way. And then, yeah, that's basically my spiel. So a little bit of bits and pieces and tips and tricks on for what we're seeing on the kind of the public side, having put together, evaluated and looked at tenders and kind of our bird's eye view from a government perspective. Things are moving in the city of Cape Town. I can promise you that much. So get ready, go through the steps diligently, and we want to see you guys. He's actually ABC painters, by the way. I saw it the other day. I normally it's the examples in like SEM manuals, but ABC painters actually exist. And they won a tender like 10 years ago. Whoever they are, it's obviously a shelf company. I always found that funny when it comes through like that, a CC. But that's my spiel. It's not a very complicated space. We make it complicated. It's a typical like a financial advisor type of style where they don't want you to know the information. We actually the opposite. We want you to know that the system is not as complicated as it seems. Yes, the tender document is 100 pages long, but if you work through these things diligently, take one page, understand one page at a time, it's really not as complicated. And we really try on our side to make it simple. Whether it's eligibility criteria, that's the gatekeepers to entry, whether it's functionality criteria, A all the way. If you've done it once or twice, pay the fee, pay the $300, put in the effort. If it fails, use the information to your advantage and be better the next time. 3, 4, 5 times you've done it, that's $1,200 that you paid in terms of your learning fees. If you get it right on the fifth time, you will get it right every single time after that because you've cracked the code. So get into the habit of just testing and testing the limits with government as well. And I wish you guys all of the best in your respective, whether it's safety, whether it's scaffolding, whether it's painting. We want to see you guys tender directly with the city as well, and still do Stefan's work as well in the private development space. That's the key. That's me.